Welcome to Commander Central, episode 346, and today we're taking a look at listener feedback from the Rifties 2022. I'm Dana.
And I'm Max.
Max, how's it going today, man?
It's pretty good. It's early on a Saturday morning, but I'm ready to talk responses.
Yeah, for sure. A little bit of business to take care of first. Chris, we had hoped would be here. Something came up, and he is not able to make it and probably won't be around for several weeks. But hopefully it's good news, actually. I don't want to go into too much detail.
I know we can say a little bit here. You did tell me that we can announce it.
Well, hey, go ahead.
Chris had a kidney transplant earlier this week. So he is recovering from that and making sure that all goes smoothly so he can keep it.
He had been on the list for a while and waiting to get it. And basically he got a call and he's like, we need you in your car on your way here. So he called Max from the road as he was on his way to get it done, and so he will not be around for several weeks here as he's recuperating. But from what information we've got, he's doing pretty well.
Yep.
So if he's not going to be on the show, that's a pretty good reason not to be on the show, I suppose.
That's probably the best reason to not be on the show.
So we're tentatively excited for him and his recovery here. The other thing, I guess, now is the time to make the announcement for, and had been, again, also hoping he'd be here for this, but he's not, so it is what it is. We are, unfortunately and sadly, going to be wrapping up the show. Our last episode will be episode 350, which is kind of crazy to, number one, that we're stopping, but number two, that we've gone that many shows at this point. I don't know if I ever really thought we'd get this many down when we first started. I mean, I guess we didn't have a plan, but it just seems like the right time to stop basically at this point. I mean, we've all had personal life stuff, particularly like the last 6 months, whether it's medical things or just, personal life changes or whatever, and it's affected our schedule a little bit and how often we can put out shows, and that's probably not going to be changing anytime in the near future. And we all kind of felt like if we couldn't do it right the way we were doing it the first 95% of the time we did the show, then it doesn't feel fair to do it. So at some point in the next 6 to 8 weeks, episode 350 will come out. We're not quite sure what our schedule will be between now and then, because we definitely want Chris to be on at least for the last show. So we've got 4 more coming down the pike, and then we will be wrapping up Commander Central. And that's pretty scary and kind of sad. But also the fact that we've managed to do 350 feels like an accomplishment as well. So I'm also proud of what we did here. And the time is just correct to put it to bed, I think.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. And I think this was a group decision. And
yes, absolutely.
We're ready. We've had a lot of fun doing this. But you get us for 4 more episodes, so...
Yeah. We will leave the show up on Libsyn. It'll be accessible from everywhere for as long as we can keep it up, which is probably, it's not terribly expensive to do so we're going to maintain that. So old episodes will be available. The Slack, if you are a supporter and are in there, will be up indefinitely as well. We're not taking that anytime soon. None of us are going away. I still obviously work for EDH and will be available there. Max is still going to be around. Yeah. and we also have discussed it's entirely possible we will drop surprise episodes here or there down the road. It probably won't be regularly, but we might well every 6 months just be like, hey, let's just record us talking about something and put an episode out there. So that's also something that it wouldn't shock me to see us do. But if you're a regular listener, we're closing the doors here in the fairly near future. And thank you to everyone who's been listening to this show for the last... I don't even know how long has it been. 7 years now, Max?
6, maybe?
6 years? I don't even... It's so long, I don't even know exactly how long it's been going on at this point.
I'm on the wrong computer, or else I could look.
I don't have it in front of me right now either. So yeah, so thanks to everyone who supported us in whatever way you've done, and we look forward to these last 4, and we'll definitely have respect for the last one. So it's an ending, but it's the right time to end, so...
Yeah.
So again, thanks everybody, and let's quick move on here and go over some of these Rifty responses, since this is the last year we'll be doing this.
Ooh.
So first things first here, the lands, we put this out to vote for Patreon supporters, both people who are just supporters in general and those in the Slack, and we got quite a few responses back. So lands first we'll look at And I'll just go over the noteworthy ones here. There was a couple for Boseiju, and it was listed, I guess, because it wasn't multiple choice. We had things like Boseiju, who endures. Boseiju voted, so there were multiple votes for Boseiju, basically, and the other one was Plaza of Heroes. Those were the two that had the most. Roasted Reliquary got one. Demolition Field, a couple votes for the Channel Lands, a couple votes for the completed Triumph Cycle. So basically, most of the ones we had talked about, nothing really shocking there among the lands.
No, I'm glad to see the Triumphs got some love because we really didn't talk about them.
We didn't. So yeah, that was good to see them get a shout. I kind of forgot about them, to be honest.
I forgot they were this year, let's be real. Like, I thought Capenna was before Kamigawa, so that's where I am right now.
Yeah. So why don't we look at the instance we got here, Max? There's a little more diversity there.
Yeah, so a lot of the responses for instance were like Jahiria's Respite, Access Denied, Delayed Fireball, Blast Fireball, and then like Slip Out the Back, and of course like an Offer You Can't Refuse is listed quite a few times as well.
Yeah, I quite like Access Denied. That's the one that it's a counterspell that costs 5 mana, but it makes Thopters, number of Thopters equal to the spell's mana value. Tamio Safekeeping, actually, I don't know why I didn't even mention that when I run it in like 3 or 4 decks good. Now. Yeah, it's such a good card. So that's really good. I want to mention your Hostile Negotiation is a really solid card. That's kind of Black's Fact or Fiction. So yeah, those are some pretty solid entries here as well. A couple that we hadn't talked about. Similarly for the sorceries, the most votes came in from listeners for Farewell, which isn't really surprising considering how ridiculously busted that card is. But a couple of ones we didn't talk about. Ornicus's Vile Duplication basically is a spark double-ish effect. It lets you make a token copy of a thing, and it doesn't matter if it's a legendary or not, the token isn't legendary. So that's a super powerful effect. And that got a couple of votes, and I don't think we mentioned that one. Ascend from Avernicus, similarly got multiple votes. But again, primarily the one worth talking about there was Farewell. So there was the listeners were mostly in agreement about which sorcery spell was the best of the year there as well. How about artifacts, Max?
Yeah, so one of the most voted for artifacts was Lion Sash, which is something we didn't talk about.
We didn't.
I don't run this card, but it is amazing.
Yeah, so I like Lion Sash. I have it in my artifact deck. For some reason, it feels to me like an artifact deck, or excuse me, an equipment deck only kind of spell. I don't know why it has to be. It's not like it's much different than Scavenging Ooze, and it's not like you only run Scavenging Ooze in, I don't know, an Ooze deck or whatever. But similar effect, it's something that you can use to target, either like just broadly to knock stuff out of a graveyard to buff it up, or to target something that someone else is going to try to bring back. So yeah, it's a really, really solid card. It feels just like White's Scavenging Ooze, basically.
Couple other notable cards was Relic of Legends, which I don't think we talked about much either, but it's just a solid uncommon, Yeah. 3-mana Brock, which is, we like to play those, and then tapping those legendary creatures, which when they print 80 a set, this card is great.
Exactly. Dragonspark Reactor got a vote. I'm a big fan of that card. It's won me games in my Jury deck. That's whenever an artifact comes into play, you put a counter on it, and you can sacrifice it to dome somebody if you want to have counters on it. So in a heavy artifact, or in my case, my treasure deck, can get real big real quick. Symmetry Matrix got a vote. That's a card that I've actually had real good luck with as well. I wasn't entirely sure how it would play because you have to spend mana to activate it to get the draw off it, but it's been really effective in my Talrand deck and in my Zero deck, are the two decks where I'm running it, because they both make a lot of tokens, which, almost always tend to be same CMC power and toughness. So that's a really solid one as well. That's a good pick. Enchantments, Reflections of Kiki-Jiki has been really good in Standard. I got a vote. Black Market Connections, actually really, really strong. Not surprised people mentioned that. Noble Heritage, one of the backgrounds. But the ones that got the most votes were Resourceful Defense and the Restoration of Iganjo. Resourceful Defense is basically kind of like an Ozolith enchantment, where if something leaves the battlefield, you can move counters onto it and then move them back over to a creature or something later on. So like it's actually probably a fair version of the Ozolith, because the Ozolith is crazy. Restoration of Iganjo is a one of the sagas that also flips, and it's basically a way to ramp in white. Search for a basic plane card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. I guess I shouldn't say ramp, but you always have, it's a catch up, puts planes into your hand. It also has like a return. The second step is return a thing from the battlefield to play, and then it transforms into a 3/4 creature with vigilance, and whenever it attacks or blocks you, it can colorless spirit creature token. So it's also a really good body when it transforms. It's not one I run anywhere, but I think I've seen it a couple times, and it's always a pretty good value creature / enchantment. Planeswalkers, Max, what do we have here?
Yeah, we had a bunch written in, and there are about three or four that kind of all got about the same amount of votes.
Yeah.
That two, Gerard Carthalion, that's the one I talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Tasha, the Witch Queen, is one we really didn't talk about. I know our good friend Joey Schultz loves that card.
He does.
Along with, what's the other one? Of course, Teferi, Temporal Pilgrim. Of course, it's Teferi. Vote for him.
They're always good.
But then Dyada, Binder of Wills, was also mentioned a couple times, which I thought was interesting. Because isn't that the Mardu one?
Yes. Cares about Legends?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that one either in play.
I think I've only seen it playing against the pre-con. But it was real good. So
yeah.
Makes sense. Again, there was a lot of Planeswalkers, and not as many as we usually have. And there wasn't like the one, I don't think, that really hugely stood out. So
no.
Nothing too different than what we had talked about. Similarly for creatures, again, we said there wasn't really a huge, crazy standout. The two that the listeners liked the most were Sheila the Apocalypse, it looks like, and Ancient Gold Dragon, which I actually kind of forgot about because it's so expensive. And I have one deck that wants it, but I just haven't been willing to spend the money on it yet. So that is worth mentioning. Also, same thing, Professional Facebreaker, which I think we had talked about. Ruthless Technomancer is a really solid card. I don't think we discussed that one, but I've had really good luck with that as well. But listeners were largely split on creatures too. Nothing really jumped out there that everyone agreed was best of the best. Archivist of Ogma as well, really good. Same with Defiler of Vigor. So everyone pretty evenly splitting the vote there on creatures.
Yeah.
Last but not least, Commanders, Max.
There's quite a few got written in.
Yeah.
We have, Myria, Scholar of Antiquity. I don't even know what that one does. Look at that, everybody. Oh, it's the Golgari elf that untapped non-token artifacts you control. You can tap for green, and then you can tap 2 non-token artifacts to exile the top card of your library and play it that turn. That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Airtai the Resurrected got voted for a few times. Yoshimaru, Ever Faithful, Reality Chip making the cut for a legendary creature. That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Anything on here you like, Dana?
I saw the Abominable is the band colored thing that cares about snow. Glad to see that get a few votes. I'll play that deck a few times, and it's always pretty fun to see. Giada got votes. Miriam, Sentinel Worm got votes. They're both really, really strong, too, and not really surprising. But again, there weren't very many that I saw here that really surprised me to see them show up on the list. So that's what the listener votes were, and nothing that was that strayed too crazy far from what we had kind of talked about as well. So thanks for everyone who sent us their feedback here on what your picks were for the year. So the next thing we did was we had some questions. We opened this up, and we'll just go through these quick, or not so quickly, depending on how much we talk. So the first question we had from listeners was, how do you figure out the balance of how much you personally play versus spending time thinking about EDH? That's an interesting question. I don't figure it out necessarily. It's just a thing that happens, I guess. I don't not like planning on I need to play this much this week necessarily. In part, though, for at least in my case, I have a kind of structured schedule. I almost always go play at my card shop on Tuesday nights, and I more often than not am playing on the EDH Recast stream on Wednesdays. So I have 2 nights a week where I'm playing pretty consistently, like maybe not every week, but 3 out of 4 weeks probably. So I always have X amount of time devoted to, at the very least, playing. Thinking about it's different. Like, I do have time if I'm gonna, that I'm doing prep work for this show and for EDH Recast every week that I have set aside for that. And I do things like when spoilers drop for a new set, almost always on a Friday. I always usually bake in some time on that Friday when the full spoiler list will be out in my schedule to spend an hour just going over every card in the set. So I'll sit down and just read through all of them and make a few notes. So that's the only thing I really have scheduled for the most part. But I mean, I'm a weirdo too. I'm online a lot, so it's not like I'm not paying attention outside those windows either. I'm on Twitter plenty. I'm on Reddit plenty. So cards don't get dropped without me reading about them, and I read a couple of Reddits. I've been in multiple Discords, so I see enough discourse on a card and get a rough idea of what the general community's thoughts are on most of the stuff pretty often. I mean, I spend a lot more time than most people, I would say, on Magic. That's just kind of how I am. How about you, Max? Do you have any breakdowns here for you? You definitely spent less time in the last year than you probably used to.
Yeah, I would say back in when I a few years ago, probably pre-pandemic, I was more like you. I was spending a lot of time on Magic, in the Reddits, within other Discords, talking about stuff, just like, happens now. But now that I don't play as often, I don't spend as much time. It's more like, hey, I'm at the bar with my buddies, and they're like, hey, did you see this card? I've become that person versus the guy saying, hey, have you seen this card?
Right.
And, I like talking about it, out with friends, but it's just not maybe, my primary hobby at the time. Sure. So it's just, I try not to put a lot of time into it right now.
Well, you had went through a spell where you were feeling kind of burnt out. So, this is, in some ways, you're kind of doing a little bit of self-preservation here. You are intentionally scaling back a little bit how much mental energy you devote so you don't feel burned out.
Right.
Which I totally get. For whatever reason, I am not going through that, but I understand how that can happen. So we're recording this on the 14th. I believe it was yesterday, the 13th. Jason Alt from Brainstorm Brewery had posted a thing on Twitter about how he's having a tough time loving Magic right now because of the sheer glut of content and because of some of the things WotC's done that feels greedy, that kind of thing.
Yep.
What's up, kitty cat? And while I don't necessarily share Jason's thoughts on that, or at least I don't feel that way. I understand why he feels that way, right? I'm not feeling as unhappy with the game right now as he is, but I get why he's gotten to that point. So yeah, it hasn't burned me out, but it's a thing to be cautious of for sure.
Yeah, and hey, I think it's different for everybody. So
yeah,
for me, the best way to not get burned out is not think about it all the time.
Max, what is your favorite card that has never made it into a deck?
Okay, I can't say never, but the card that always gets cut either after 1 or 2 games or at the 101 spot is Compost. I think it's just one of my favorite old school cards. I've tried running it. It's really meta dependent, but that's always a card I wish I could play in any green deck.
Good pick. Yeah, I had to think about this one for a little bit. Weirdly enough, I had the two that popped into my brain. One is about as new as a card can be, and one is about as old as a card could be, and they share the same name, which is weird. The first one would be Vesuvan Doppelganger from way back in Alpha, but there's just so many more efficient clone effects, and there has been for years. It's also a little bit expensive, but it's one of my favorite all-time cards. It has gorgeous art. I have a playmat of that art, so it's one of my favorites, and I just don't have it in a deck at all because it hasn't been a reason to do so. And the other one, the new one, is Vesuvan Duplomancy, which we talked about, I think, last week. Enchantment, that when you have it in play, when you target a creature you control, you make a copy of that creature. Which is a super cool effect, too. I don't have anything that really does that. I don't have, any blue decks that routinely target my own creatures. So I don't have a place for it, but I think it's a super cool card, and I like it a ton. I just don't have a place to run it. So
right.
Those are the two in terms of this year's one that I've liked the most, but haven't ran, and all time. Those are the ones that jump to mind for me as favorite cards that are made into the deck. Next one is, when are you going to come back to Canada?
I've never been.
Max has never been there. I have not been there for a while. I've been very close to Canada. I mean, first of all, we're not very far from Canada as it is, but I've been to Upper Michigan a couple times in the last year. I just haven't crossed over to the border. Actually, my mom and my sister right now are 100 yards from the border. They're up in Sault Ste. Marie, Upper Michigan, which is right on the Canadian border to Sault Ste. Marie, Canada, visiting. That's where my grandma is. They're visiting her right now, so they're a stone's throw from Canada as it is right now. But we've had that conversation about going up to, see the CCO guys or something. But there's just so many trips that, that seems it's a long ways to go and it's tough to do. If there was an event in Canada, I would definitely probably try to find a way to do that. If there was something like, say, in Toronto or Calgary, wherever, I would probably try to find a way to do that, I think. But there hasn't been yet. So, yeah, that's why we have not been up to Canada so far. Max, what has been your least favorite new commander that you've actually played against? Not in theory, one you've actually ran into.
Oh, I don't think I've played against too many new commanders. Okay. I have played against a Lord Xander the Collector deck once, and I knew what I was getting into, and it was still worse than what I expected.
The vote for me recently would probably be Sephiroth of the Hidden Ways, but generally speaking, I would say the commanders I least like playing against, just in general, are number one, that monopolize time, where I spend a lot of time just on my phone or whatever because you're doing something. And particularly when I don't know what it is you're doing or when it's requiring me to do extra mental work. I complain about mutate, but I guess I don't know if I've ever actually voiced what bothers me about mutate as a mechanic or mutate as a mutate commanders. Yes, they're annoying because the rules for mutate are really annoying, but that's only part of why I dislike mutate. What I dislike about mutate is I don't know what's going on over there. Like your cards are upside down and like, okay, I can look and I know what most creatures are in the game. But number one, mutate comes from a set where there's like, multiple alternate arts of a lot of those creatures. They're all donkey, plumber, electrician hybrids. So like I don't know what you can't tell from the art what it's supposed to be. Because the way mutate works, there's a lot of like commons and uncommons people run just for the mutate effect as well. So it's not like I'm just like paying attention to the mythic angel from the set. I have to remember a bunch of commons and uncommons as well. So you have and the way mutate works, you're stacking these things so I can't see them. So they're upside down. I can't see them. I can't recognize the art. I don't know what any of them do. You're forcing me to do a bunch of extra work and try to keep track of what's about to happen. It's difficult to do. And by difficult, I mean impossible. And if someone tells you it's not, they're lying. There's just too much data there to keep track of. I'm not saying you shouldn't play mutate. I'm just like saying that's the real problem I have with mutate. It's time consuming. The rules are difficult, but also I don't know what the hell's happening. So that's to a degree the problem I have with Sephiroth, and why I didn't enjoy the couple Sephiroth experiences I have is similarly. Sephiroth is a dungeon commander, but the way Sephiroth has always worked, people are doing things to enable them to advance or loop through that dungeon multiple times. And it winds up being, number one, very time consuming. And number two, I can't read what that small dungeon card that's upside down with tiny text is either as you're looping through rooms. So it's demanding that I do extra work and I can't tell what's happening. And it's just not fun to play against when I'm sitting there on my phone because I'm bored as you're like doing a thing that I can't respond to and can't tell what's going on. So Sephiroth is my pick, but in general, my answer is almost always going to be something that consumes time and makes it difficult for me to keep track of what's happening. So anyway, those are my answers. The first time I encountered this was for a commander that did all those things was Marisol Pretender, Commander 2017, I believe. Same thing. Bunch of text in the card. The person's exiling like weird, goofy old commons and uncommons that have some activated ability they want to use. So it's time-consuming cards I can't read, can't memorize what they're doing, sitting off to the side that I can't see, that's affecting my game state. So Marisol was the first one that really did that, but we've really heavily leaned into that in design, both in terms of mutate and dungeon kind of stuff. So that's just, maybe it's a pet peeve of mine and doesn't bother anybody else, but at the very least, that's a thing that annoys me, and that's what makes for a least favorite new commander that I've played against. Best reprint art of the year. For the listener, they say, for me, burgeoning full art from Secret Lair, and it's relatively cheap on the secondary market. Anything that jumped out for you for art you liked about this year, Max?
I like the Secret Lair Berserk that got reprinted. The guy, like, kind of mid-transformation. I like that it's kind of reminds me of the original art from, like, Alpha and Beta, plus the newer, like, From the Vault and Conspiracy artwork. Just kind of like a cool mix of both.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we got really nice Mystic Remora art this year. A couple versions of it, actually. And we got really good Concordant Crossroads art. That was nice to see as well. So, like, those are two cards that it was nice to see a reprint with some cool art. Because, number one, we needed reprints of both those cards because we didn't have them. We needed foils of both those cards because we didn't have them. And we got really cool art versions of both of those cards. I also think a lot of the art I've seen from set isn't even out yet, the upcoming excuse me, Phyrexia All-Will 1 art. There's a lot of super cool art in there I think I've seen so far too.
I'm sorry, your voice just right there. I thought you like inhaled a helium balloon.
I took a drink and I had like just the right bubble in my throat that I sounded like a Muppet. So yes, that's what that was. But no, so there's some really cool art I've liked a lot from Phyrexia All-Will 1 as well that we've seen so far.
Yeah, I also think, like, just the whole reprinting the artifacts in the old border, like the brown borders, that's just nostalgic for me, and
yes,
I just really like that, see that, and I know some people don't, so.
Yeah, you can't please everyone all the time. Like, a lot of the Secret Lairs ones I haven't loved. I don't think the death metal concert kind of art is very, it doesn't do anything for me, but, like, Number one, it gets his reprints out there, and if there's probably some people who think that's super cool. So, I like that they're trying to hit different quadrants in terms of art as well. Some people, you don't like it, but like they've, I think, done a pretty nice job with art in the last year or three, I think, especially. What is for dinner? Mac, what's for dinner tonight for you?
That's a question I'm going to answer in like 7 hours from now. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't either. My son is at robotics club all day today, so I'm basically going to hold off and see. I might text him, an hour or two before he's done to see if he's in the mood for anything, see if he responds. But I will be at his mercy with what he wants after spending his entire Saturday doing robotics stuff. I will let him decide what he wants for dinner. So that'll be that. I actually I made a little homemade pizza last night that was quite good.
Nice.
So yeah, and then next weekend, Max and I we have a friend in town. We're gonna, I think, go out and have a nice Friday night fish fry as well.
Oh yeah, and play lots of Commander.
Yes, that is a goal. So there we go. Yeah, we'll be devoting some time to that next weekend as well. What is the most interesting deck you saw in 2022? That's a tough one. I did see quite a few cool ones. I saw a mono black equipment. No, sorry, excuse me, an Orzhov equipment deck.
7-mana Teysa?
No.
Okay.
It was Arden and Ooh. I don't remember.
The black.
One of the partners.
The mono black partner.
Yeah, which I don't remember even which one. I think two of them do artifact stuff.
Yeah, the green one, the green and the black one both do.
Yeah, but what I liked about that was it was running almost all of the most recent. The good black, the cool like weird black equipment. So like there was a Vorpal sword in it, and at one point the person had a Vorpal sword out and the pact weapon.
Oh dang!
So which was neat. So like that was just fun to see an equipment deck running that kind of junk. So I thought that was cool. And I don't think I've ever seen an equipment other than my attempt to run 7-mana Teysa equipment. I hadn't seen a Orzhov equipment deck. So that was actually pretty cool to see. So that's the big one that probably jumps out at me.
Oh, I think I remember a couple cool ones I saw this year. We did in Vegas. We saw a partner deck with Will and Lucas, I believe, the two Stranger Things cards.
Yep.
It was either Lucas and Will or Lucas and Dustin. But that was just a cool, like, blinky, make a bunch of treasures.
A lot of clues and treasures and stuff.
Clues and treasures. But it was a combo deck, but wasn't that...
Yeah.
You sit there and wait for it to do its thing. It was a very, very fun to play against. The owner was super cool about it as well. I also think just all the new vehicle decks that have come out, since the guy has been getting a lot of support, are super fun to play against. So those would be my two big ones.
I would say I like those. We mentioned the Bant Snow Commander earlier on their creature voting. And I've played against that deck, I think, twice. It's only been out a few weeks. And that was a fun deck to play against when I played it as well. Those are the big ones, top of my head. But I mean, it was a long year. I played a lot of decks. I should have actually maybe made a note if I played a really particularly cool one. What is your favorite afternoon, evening snack, Max?
Oh, I'm like a gummies person. So like gummy bears, Sour Patch Kids. Like I'm a candy guy.
I've seen you do that.
Licorice. Like I'll eat a bag of Red Vines. Like it's going out of style.
Okay. Salty snack for me. My favorite, assuming I have time, is popcorn. And
you go like old school when you make your popcorn. You don't throw it in the microwave.
I do not. I have a little it's called a whirly pop. It has a hand crank on the top, and I make it with coconut oil like you do at a movie theater. And I have a whole technique. I know exactly how much coconut oil I use, which is there's a popcorn method called the too much oil method, and that's the one I use with coconut oil. And I have a nice popcorn that I buy online from a certain place that I've tried a ton of popcorn over the years, and this is the one I like the best. And I have pestle. I have a little mortar and pestle I use to grind down salt, which I guess I could just use. I could buy a thing of popcorn salt, but
you're sounding pretty bougie there, Dana.
I am. 100%. I am absolutely a snob while making my popcorn. So yes, I like grind salt down to a powder to put on my popcorn, and sometimes I'll use I'll put some garlic in the oil when I pop it if I'm in the mood for that, or a little bit of Parmesan on it, that kind of stuff. I've done it with a little bit of heat.
Ooh.
Before I put some jalapeno sauce or something in it before if I want a little bit of heat in the popcorn, cumin, something like that. So it depends what kind of mood I'm in. But that's that. If I have time, like if I'm planning on watching a movie or something at night and I've got the opportunity to make popcorn, I tend to make some bougie popcorn for sure. How have your decks survived the year? Have any changed commanders or been taken apart or reworked from the ground up? So let's see. I took apart my Mina and deck Landfall deck, and I took apart my Sigarda Enchantress deck. So Mina and Den was Gruul, Sigarda was Selesnya. I then built. I basically kept the land base from the Sigarda deck, and that's what I made my Selesnya Dragons deck, which is Dromoka the Eternal. And then I used about half of the remaining cards that I just put into a mono green Thrun enchantment deck. So it's functionally like almost half of the Sigarda deck, basically. This Thrun isn't that much different than Sigarda. So basically I've removed white from the equation. I've only played it once. Literally I finished it like 3 days ago. So I'm curious to see how that plays. One of the reasons I quit my Enchantress deck was that there's too many toys. I felt like it was just too easy. And it didn't have any character. Like every Selesnya Enchantress deck at this point looks the same. So it wasn't fun to play for all those reasons. So we'll see if playing it as a mono green deck by removing, things like Sithis and Mace Enchantress and basically a lot of the good auras too. A lot of the good, good auras in Enchantress deck are white. So I'm curious to see if that is enough to make that deck fun again. Similarly, Mina and Den, the Landfall deck, every Landfall deck felt like it was the same too, so I didn't really necessarily enjoy playing that anymore. So I'd taken that one apart for that reason. And then, because I had a lot of the pieces still in that land base, I wound up turning my Kresh deck into a Minsk and Boo deck. So that answers a question about if any changed commanders. So my Minsk and Boo deck is basically my Kresh Flame deck, but it's in Gruul colors instead of in Jund. And I didn't have a huge reason for that other than I had a couple wonky experiences with that Kresh deck where something, like I'd play Kresh and something would happen where someone would do like a partial board wipe and Kresh would survive, and like all of a sudden I have a 28-28 Kresh.
On turn 4 or 5.
Right, yeah, early on or something, and then like, well, I gotta kill somebody. I'm not gonna like not attack, but that's not what I want this deck to do. So that was it wound up being just a weird thing that I didn't like, and also because Kresh didn't necessarily do any fling stuff either. Like I could get him big if I flung something else, then that would make Kresh big for flinging Kresh, but because Minsk and Boo functionally has a fling effect baked into them as an activated ability in the command zone, then I also didn't have that thing where like I would sometimes find myself unable to draw a fling effect, so that wouldn't work the way I wanted it to work. I always have that in the command zone now.
Yeah.
So I liked that too. Like it also then let me take a couple of fling effects out, so I didn't think I was having to run 14 of them, like literally every one ever printed, just so I could like make sure I would at least always find one. I could pull a few out then too, and it let me kind of open the deck up a little bit more. So that was that change there. I think those are the main ones I did this year. Was there anything from you, Max?
Oh, 2022 was the year I killed a lot of decks. So I started the year off by taking apart my Psy Master Thopterus deck, just because it wasn't fun to play, like it didn't do anything, in my opinion. Then I built the Ishin of Two Hearts from Kamigawa, and I played that for some of the year, but it's a 3-color deck, and I don't like playing 3 colors. So that got shelved. I then built Old Gnawbones because I wanted a green stompy deck, and I might as well make all the mana in the world.
Right.
And that's still together, and I like playing that because it is just big, dumb, green stompy, and after a couple board wipes, I'm out of luck, essentially. And then I have the cards on order for Blanca, Ferocious Fiend from the Street Fighter Secret Lair that I'm going to be building, hopefully in time for GP Minneapolis. Excellent. Or Magic Con Minneapolis, whatever we're calling them now.
For decks I built in 2022, I had to check to see if my Arden and SCR deck was 2022, and that was end of 2021, so that doesn't make the cut. I did love that one. That was a lot of fun. But the one I probably liked that I built last year the most was Jaheira, Friend of the Forest, and Agent of the Iron Throne.
I love that deck.
Jaheira, tokens you control tap for a green, Agent of the Iron Throne. When a creature or artifact gets put in your graveyard, deals damage to everybody. So that started out originally as Savarok, the Merciless and Raised by Giants. And Savarok is a creature that at the end of the turn, if a creature didn't leave play your opponents take damage equal to Sarevok's power. Raised by Giants makes Sarevok a 10-10. So like the plan was I would get those two out, and because the deck was filled with things that make Eldrazi spawns and Scions, I would always have something to sacrifice. So I could always make something leave play. So I never took the damage trigger myself, but everyone else would. The problem was just because there's at this point so many not even true fetch lands, or so many Fabled Passage kind of lands, as well as so many treasures. I don't know if in the 5 or 6 games I played it, I don't think anybody took damage. I don't think it worked once, because there was just something always people were able to make leave play to avoid the trigger. So I was taking it apart, and I'm like, well, is there something else I can do with the same exact deck? And so I'm looking through, and I'm like, well, Jaheira is a green creature and a black creature like Sarevok, but okay, I can make all those Eldrazi spawns and Scions tap for mana. That's, I guess, useful. And hey, Agent Iron Throne, I can sacrifice them and deal damage. So nothing has to change about the deck.
Right.
But the strategy is totally different. Before I was relying on damage being dealt by the commander. In this case, I'm relying on damage being dealt by the Scions being sacrificed. So the source of damage is entirely different, but literally no cards changed. And obviously since then I've made tweaks, because that's just how I am. I constantly tweak decks. But basically, at the time, I was able to, when I made the decision, I literally went from 1 week playing Sarevok and Raised by Giants to the next week playing Jaheira and Agent Iron Throne, and nothing changed with the commanders. The deck functioned much differently with the exact same cards, which was super weird. And it's super fun. Because I'm running, the creature list is terrible. It's Birthing Hulk, Blister. I'll read them all. Birthing Hulk, Blister Pod, Brood Butcher, Brood Monitor, Carrier Thrall, Catacomb Sifter, Dread Drone, Eyeless Watcher, Kozilek's Predator, Nest Invader, Pawn of Ulamog, Scion Summoner, Sifter of Skulls, and Smothering Abomination. Aside from Smothering Abomination, those are all terrible.
Yeah, that's what I love about watching people play against that deck, especially if they've been playing since Battle for Zendikar. They watch you play these terrible draft commons and uncommons from that block, and you can see their mind turning as if okay, he's building up to something. When does the Ulamog come out?
Yes,
when does this?
Right.
And it's I'm just gonna tap him, sacrifice him, and you're all dead.
Right, yes. And then the other dumb thing that I wound up stumbling across too was Kindred Summons is the green Kindred spell.
Oh,
5 and a green, and you choose a creature type and reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal X creatures of the chosen type. Well, because everything in the deck basically is an Eldrazi, and so are Spawns and Scions. Once I have 4 or 5 Spawns and Scions out, if I cast Kindred Summons, I basically put every creature in my deck into play. And they all then make 3 or 4 creatures, because when they all have ETBs that make Spawns and Scions mostly. And everyone just dies.
Yep.
So Kindred Summons is hilarious in that deck too. So yeah, it's been, I run a bunch of dumb stuff in there that also, aside from creatures, Skittering Invasion makes Spawns and Scions, and Warping Whale makes a Scion, which I've then wound up using the counter spell on Warping Whale multiple times, which is always funny too. So for me, that's the deck I think that I made last year that I've really enjoyed the most, because it's just running a bunch of oddball cards, but it's also been very, very effective.
Yeah.
I think the other one I put together last year was that Dromoka deck too, because I don't even know why what inspired me to build the not as good as your Dromoka list. Other than I thought it was funny that I already had a Dimir dragon deck. Why not build the other 2 colors I don't have that aren't red in a dragon deck as well? And it wound up, because of the way Dromoka the Eternal works with the Vulture trigger, had some synergy with +1 counters, and it just so happens that a handful of the dragons in green care about +1 counters as well, and then green has +1 counter synergy, so I was able to actually give the deck some identity in a way I didn't really know it was going to have when I was first goofing around with it. So that one has been pretty fun, but Jaheira and Agent Iron Throne is definitely the one I've liked the most. All right, I think that's it for the questions we got in from listeners. Thank you all very much. We appreciate the feedback in terms of Rifties, and appreciate the questions. And Chris already had his answers. But he's not going to get a chance to read them, so maybe we'll hit him up with a few of these and see if he's improved enough next week to read a couple of his responses as well in the air.
Yeah, or at least maybe text us some answers or something.
Yeah. So, all right, y'all. Thanks, everyone, for listening to episode 346 of Commander Central. We'll be back. Not sure if it'll be next week, probably the week after, because we kind of want to
spread these out.
Yeah, spread them out so we can definitely have Chris back for the last one. So, probably be going every other week for the next 6-ish weeks until we run upon 350. But thank you very much for listening. I'm Dana. You can find me on Twitter at Dana Roach. You can find Max at CMDR Central _Max. And you can find Chris at WiseSquishy1. Our podcast theme is Retro Future Dirty by Kevin MacLeod. And our show is edited by Rafael Garcia, who you can find on Twitter at Ursa Bearwalker. And we'll be back soon. Thanks.